My name is Paul Houghton, and it's my pleasure on behalf of Leeds Beckett University to invite you here to the annual series, the lecture series for Leeds Business School. It's a delight that the whole programme has been sponsored this year by Yorkshire Bank, and it's good to see three representatives here tonight supporting that, so welcome to you and thanks. So there's Keith Ollier's Regional Head of Credit, and Mike Lawson and Nigel Bilton. It's really good to see you here, and to see everyone else. I think such a wide variety of people that have registered to come tonight. Great to see so many students and also people outside, to bring people in and to attract people from the business world. I think demonstrates the type of speaker that we've managed to attract. And today is no exception, as can be seen by the numbers that are here. It's my delight tonight to welcome Colin. Colin has earned his money this afternoon. Not only has he turned up to deliver this evening's lecture, but he's already been working with postgraduate students in our PR school for the last couple of hours. And so if he fails, if he just collapses at some stage during the presentation, it's just exhaustion, and we'll get someone out to revive him. Colin's experience is phenomenal. So working in private practice, but also in the public sector, working in government, the list goes on. And I was absolutely amazed when I went down some of the roles that you've actually played, Colin, in terms of getting to where you are at the moment. I think the world of PR is massive, and coming into a year where we have an election, Colin's just been talking about that, what a role that sector has to play, and I'm sure Colin will share some of his experience from that area this evening. Colin's firm in particular, Weber Shandwick, have developed a philosophy, a strategy entitled The Science of Engagement. And Colin has come here tonight prepared to talk a little bit about that and to share some of the practical learnings that we can get, not just from within PR, but from across business as well. Colin, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. And
we're all looking forward to this very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Paul said to me just before you arrived that this was one of the biggest audiences for these sort of lectures. So I said, well, look, I really hope I don't screw it up, but you must tell me if I do. Let's just do a little experiment. How many of you have a smartphone? Hold it up. This is the most powerful tool in marketing and communications today. Less computing power than it took to deliver men to the moon. 1 in 5 people in the planet now have one. In Africa and some parts of the emerging world, more people have smartphones than have access to a running toilet. And in Africa, which is a country I'm very passionate about, where, in some countries like Kenya, interesting to our bankers in the audience, 80% or more of private wealth is moved around by smartphone, not by banks anymore, or not by physical banks. And in Africa, they reckon that the number of smartphones is going to increase 6-fold in the next 11 years. So technology is increasingly playing a big part in our lives, in our businesses, and for those of you studying or interested in public relations, in our profession as well. I did a little thing the other day. I'm looking currently for a 6-month intern to work with me as a research assistant. Normally I would have placed an ad in Media Guardian or whatever, but instead I tweeted it. And within 5 minutes, it had been retweeted 53,000 times. For nothing. Cost me absolutely nothing. How many of you are familiar with the the Dunkin' Donut case study during the Super Bowl when the lights went out? No? It's an interesting one, look at it. Something like 100 million retweets of a very cheeky little tweet when, not Dunkin' Donuts, it was Oreos, got the wrong client. Cost nothing, spread 100 million. and engage lots of people as well. So technology has changed the rules of business and the rules of marketing. And I guess there are three things I want to talk about tonight. One is kind of the evolution of PR to what I now like to think is a respectable profession, which certainly it wasn't when I came into it. It was popularly for failed journalists, failed politicians and failed lawyers. And now we get people who used to go into the city or law or management consultancy coming into the industry. Secondly is technology and where science meets art, which is very important to those of us in marketing. And thirdly is communications as a C-suite issue, which is something, again, you know, I've observed with my clients and in my industry over the years. So to crack on, bit about me. I've been in this industry for 30 odd years. I fell into it because I failed as a rock journalist to make any money, so it became a hobby rather than a job. I started off in the private sector, then I went to work for somebody who some of you might have heard of called Peter Mandelson, and worked with Tony Blair on the creation of what became New Labour. And then I switched direction, went to work for Prince Charles's charities, the Prince's Trust, because I was interested in sustainable development. And then I kind of, again, fell sideways into consultancy. I had never thought of a career as a consultancy back in 1995. I'm a very enthusiastic tweeter, which proves that you can teach old dogs new tricks. And I also blog at burnbabyburn.com. Astonished somebody already. Bit about Weber Shandwick, second largest PR network in the world. Third largest in the UK, have been for about 3 decades. The only international consultancy that came out of the UK rather than New York or Chicago, which as a Brit makes me quite proud. But also very proud that 20% of my business in the UK sits outside of London in what London is referred to as the regions. I'm a Mancunian, so I'm quite proud of the fact that creativity and communications innovation doesn't stop and start at the Watford Gap. I thought I'd just show you a few little films to visualise what I see as some of the changes in PR. This is where I'm bound to mess it up. Here we go.
Freedom is being able to be myself.
With your wife who is expecting a lovely baby.
Libertà è andare in giro in scooter per Roma.
Inizia Martin müzik bebekis dobarin het hissini meç lovale.
Freedom means to me that you're free to fly all over the world wherever you want to go.
Freedom means to you.
So much. Freedom means to be free to eat.
Freedom is to free from feeling of hatred, greed and ignorance.
Freedom is when you're able to express your feelings and make your own decisions.
Freedom is learning and teaching others.
I know what it's like to have no choices. I've been cut. I know what it's like to have no voice. I know what it's like to be silenced. And I know what it's like to feel alone.
I was 14 when my mother bought me a dress and said, "Put this on, you're getting married."
We are in such a special time right now. This is a time where every voice can be heard, every opinion can be considered.
We have the freedom to choose.
Choose to help give young girls and women a choice.
Take action. Sign the pledge and end female genital mutilation and child early and forced marriage within a generation.
So that we can make a difference in this world.
So very proud to have been part. You probably saw the coverage around the Girl Effect Summit recently. Angelina Jolie was in town for it. David Cameron opened it. Who do you think my client was for that campaign? Anybody? It was Nike, the Nike Foundation. One of the foundations that we work with, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Lego Foundation, etc., which is an extension of corporates and brands into difficult areas. When I came into PR, if I'd have said to my clients, hey, guess what? We're going to support the emancipation of women in Africa, they'd have said, no, we're going to support the local orchestra, because that's what CSR was in those days. I'm going to ask you, by the way, at the end of these two films, if there's anything particularly you noticed about them. So for this, we also did the world's first Instagram summit, really engaging people around the world in what's been, quite a difficult issue. So let's see if I can get the second one to work, having not screwed up the first movie.
Scandic is Northern Europe's biggest hotel chain, and that is actually a problem. Scandic is too well known. Everybody has a predetermined opinion. So when Scandic made its biggest investment ever in new interior design, few experienced it because the fixed perceptions kept new target groups from coming. So we took one redesigned room, complete with everything you could ask for, and checked the whole room out from the hotel. And we built a digital booking service so that the room could be booked to wherever you want. Suddenly, room service wasn't ordering to your room. It was ordering the room to you. To gain a new breed of ambassadors, the room visited events with an audience that new design sought to attract. At Pride Stockholm and at the political summit in Almedalen, the mobile hotel room became the Holy Grail in the otherwise fully booked cities. And soon enough, fixed perception started to shift. During the campaign period, the number of online booked hotel nights was up 20% compared to the same period the previous year. An increase due to gained market share rather than a growing market. Usually, you must check in before you can check something out. But sometimes, you must check something out in order to want to check in. Scandic to go.
So it's two films, one from my London office, one from my Swedish office. Those of you who are involved in PR, anything jump out at you there?
Yeah, very American accent in the second.
Yeah, all Swedes do American accent voiceovers, don't ask me why. Very little reference to press coverage, which was the key activity that PR professionals were engaged in until relatively recently. Secondly, engagement obviously through social media rather than what we call traditional or core media. And then thirdly, the little film from Sweden, which to my mind is one of the most creative marketing places in the world, not New York or London. Making stuff, having an idea and making it. Those are campaigns which traditionally would come from advertising agencies, and they're now coming from PR agencies. And it's part of the growth of PR out of what I see as the silo that it's been in for years, as the press release people, the publicity people, the press cuttings people. Anybody, Paul's exempted here because I've told him what this. Anyone have a guess what these two numbers are? The top one is, actually it's 62,000 now, the number of people earning a living through professional public relations in the UK. Guess what the 40,000 is? The number of journalists working in the UK. PRs now, scarily for some, outnumber journalists. And a lot of that growth of PR has been driven by journalists taking their skills into a different branch of communications, public relations. But, we're going to talk a lot about the future, but, I'm a bit of a purist. When I first came into PR, after my glorious failure as a rock journalist, my very first boss, who remains a friend 33 years later, gave me a book, and it was like the equivalent then to the Dummy's Guide to PR. And on page 1, there was a definition. But most people I worked with then, and a lot of people still, and for those of you who have the pleasure to work with ad agencies who refer to us as the free media people, as if you fall over it in a gutter. Oh, look, there's some positive press coverage. I mean, for most of PR's history, it was about being an intermediary between a brand or an organisation as a journalist. You'd write a press release, you'd send it to a journalist, you'd hope they'd read it, you'd hope they'd understand it, you'd hope they'd write about it, you'd hope they wouldn't screw up all the facts in the process of writing about it, and then you hope that someone out there would actually read it who may just buy your product. It was a bit of an inexact science. But as I say to my trainees, we were not in PR born as a profession of press release writers. It just happens that for most of the last 3 or 4 decades, the press and broadcast media were the major conduit or channel to those people we were seeking to influence. But if you look at the original definition, and the top one was the one that was in my Dummy's Guide to PR 30 odd years ago, the dialogue between an organisation and its public. And the key difference in that description and the practice of advertising, for example, is dialogue. We are the dialogue people. Communications is not one way, that's broadcast. Communications is two-way. And we are traditionally the discipline that has been the ears and the listeners of an organisation, as well as the voice of an organisation. So I think the founding principle of the profession of PR is more relevant in today's very complex world than it was when I first fell into it. So we talk about the engagement era because I think the difference between now and maybe 10, 20 years ago, before the web and now social media completely interrupted the practice of marketing and corporate communications, is it's about engagement. It used to be about broadcast. It used to be one way. Now it has to be two-way. How many of you follow brands on a Facebook page or on their Twitter feed, brands that you like? Yeah, me too. I'm obsessed with some brands. I'm a very keen guitarist. I'm very pleased to own 2 Gibson Les Paul guitars. And the marketing director for Gibson rang me up today and said, we're looking for a PR agency. Can I come and see you? It's like, please, please do that, because that's one of the brands I follow. But we want to engage with those brands. And then if there are other brands we don't like, I have a pet hate train company which tortures me on a weekly basis by cancelling trains and leaving me for hours on Waterloo Station. And 7 years ago, I would have privately fumed. I would have gone to talk to some poor sod on the Waterloo information counter who really couldn't give us stuff. Now I can tweet, and my tweets get retweeted by other pissed off commuters, and suddenly Southwest trains are coming to me and say, oh, you know, let's talk to you about this, can we do that? So it's empowering consumers and citizens. I go back to the smartphone. This was a tool in Middle East revolutions. Yeah, it can topple dictators, it can topple corporate reputations in a way that 10 years ago we were not that empowered. So that's why I talk about the engagement era. But the other thing I really, really believe in, I know some of you are from the business community and some of you want to work in the business community, organisations do not have PR problems. How often have you read a story about a company going through a tough time, or a politician going through a tough time like most of ours are at the moment, and they talk about their PR problem? People don't have PR problems, they have business problems that communications is increasingly relevant to. I was lucky enough to be picked to be a mentor a couple of weeks ago with a group of rising star ad agency professionals, and it was really interesting as a PR guy observing the way advertising agencies, who've always been more into the sort of granular analytics of the business of a business rather than just the reputation of a business. And, you know, over 3 days I worked with these guys, and 40% of the time across those 3 days, they were just delving into data, analytics, insights, market research, talking to everybody from the CEO to the shop floor of an organisation. Traditionally, you give a brief to PR people until relatively recently, and they'd go from, here's the brief, oh, let's have a brainstorm and think up a crazy idea. Where's the strategy? Where's the insights that's born out of? And I think that is changing. But my simple point is, people don't have PR problems, they have business problems, and communications is increasingly a solution to those problems. There's a terrific American guy who's written some really brilliant books. His latest one, The New Rules of Marketing PR, talks about the impact of the web and now social media on the business of marketing. And as you can see, until relatively recently, if you were running a business and you wanted attention, you had two options: buy expensive advertising, which was always a bit hit and miss whether it would actually connect with the people you want to connect with, or get third-party ink through the media, i.e. PR. The web's changed all that, and increasingly, we are now working with brands who have emotional connections rather than just transactional connections with their consumers and their fans. And going back to my team of ad people, you would be, if you've ever worked with ad agencies, you'd be forgiven for thinking that actually what they do is they think in terms of 30-second TV commercials, which increasingly nobody is watching because you're TiVoing it out, or if you're under 18, you're probably not watching television at all. But they didn't do that. They went into what I call the new sort of ecosystem of marketing and communications, where yes, paid media may still be a feature of it, but increasingly PR agencies are getting into paid media. We launched, my company launched an advertising agency in the USA recently. There's a PR company, and we're already the agency of record for some of Unilever's biggest household names, a PR agency, creating really engaging advertising. Obviously, there is earned media, or free media, as the advertising guys call it, which has been traditionally the bread and butter of PR. And you do have to earn it. Those of you who ever dealt with a really sceptical journalist will know that it's not free. You really do sweat blood, sweat and tears to sell that story. But there's also increasingly a company or organisation's own channels, their YouTube channel, their blog, their website, etc. And finally, and the most exciting bit for me, I think, as the oldest tweeter in town, is shared. Companies, organisations, brands creating content that you like so much, you're going to share it with your friends. The Oreo tweet being probably a very good recent example. So this is the new ecosystem that those of us in PR actually work in, as opposed to just the earned space over in the corner there. But PR does have a reputation problem. So any of you watch Mad Men? Good God, you're kidding me. Nobody watches Mad Men? One, well done. Brilliant series. And there's Don Draper, the moody, genius creative. He walks into a room and looks at a projector and he says, "That's a carousel." He brands something, which then becomes the name and the differentiator for that particular product. Another TV series which I confess I don't watch, Sex and the City. There's Samantha. Guess what Samantha's profession is? PR, because she goes to parties and all that sort of stuff. So we do have a reputation problem. A couple of years ago, the media section of The Guardian used to run a survey of the most influential people in the media. And the poster children for the PR industry were Andy Coulson, in jail. Max Clifford, in jail. I could go on. Alistair Campbell, not quite in jail. Possibly could be. These were the people who were the poster children for the PR industry. No wonder a lot of people decided not to go into it in those days. So we do have a bit of a reputation problem. And I think it's a reputation problem which actually limits our business and the growth of our business. We did a survey recently with Marketing Week, which is the Bible that chief marketing officers look to for trends and new information as opposed to agency gossip. And nearly 50% of UK CMOs surveyed still said that their advertising or digital agency was their key partner, their key strategic partner. Only 13% cited their PR agency. Now, for those of you who work with companies will know the CMO has a big budget and the head of PR has a tiny budget. Which one would you rather work with? Yeah? But the interesting other, have any of you worked in-house as a marketing director or a brand marketer? Well, the other interesting thing about them is people think that people like Keith Weed at Unilever, etc., are creative people. Marketing directors are not creative people. They are numbers people. All they care about is numbers, sales, ROI. They hire creative people, ad agencies, digital agencies, etc. So in this country, a lot of people with the big marketing budgets and the big spend are starting to wonder why they're spending it all on television advertising that half their consumers don't watch anymore, but they still don't quite trust PR. Because in PR, we still get a couple of things wrong. And that's why I love talking to audiences like this, because I think that, you know, the future is kind of in this room. They understand analytics and insights and how to prove impact on the business. So I go back to my Scandinavian film. In there was the impact of PR on sales. Very rarely does a PR director talk about sales. They talk about raising awareness and sort of slightly ephemeral things, which if you're a numbers guy, yeah, you don't care about raising awareness, you care about sales, yeah? So we've got to sort of get our act together and learn a bit more from advertising in terms of these disciplines like data, big data and analytics, and understanding the business of the business, yeah? Because if you're a CEO, you don't hire a PR agency to create a raft of press cuttings. You hire them to do something, impact reputation, impact sales, launch a new product. So what's our vision of the future? Well, my vision of the future, and this is, you know, when I talk a lot about the PR agency of the future, but it's also true if you happen to be in-house or you employ a PR agency. First of all, real-time communications. We're in an always-on world. There was a really interesting one when the latest royal pregnancy was announced. Within 7 minutes, Nissan UK had published a cheeky little quote. Says, it could be triplets and there would still be enough room in our car for the Queen. Yeah, 7 minutes. And that got, let me see here, gazillions of retweets. So speed is very, very important. Secondly, as I say, and I'll talk a bit more about this, the perfect synthesis of art and science. And marketing has kind of always got the art bit right. Yeah, the sort of creative stuff, the beautiful mood films, the beautiful adverts shot on some desert island somewhere with a huge budget. But it's been pretty crap about the science until, you know, the web came along and technology impacted marketing and we had to understand science. Deep insights, as I say, analytics, very, very important. And ideas and creativity as well. Creativity used to be the domain of the advertising agency, you know, moody people with shirts open to here and crazy hair. Now, more of those creatives are moving into PR because they think it is a better future for them. So what can science do? Well, science can do lots of things, but in terms of marketing, it can help identify the business problem that we are trying to solve, and it can help deep understanding of particular categories or audience. Science can do other things as well, and if any of you are lucky enough to go to the Cannes Festival of Creativity, which used to be the Cannes Advertising Festival, as opposed to until they changed it a few years ago to let oiks like me in. You will see that increasingly winners at Cannes are what I call creative technology, a billboard which converts water moisture into drinkable water into an area of Latin America which suffers from droughts. You know, stuff that we could only have dreamt of would have been science fiction 15 years ago. We are now building things with creative technology, which is again where the science kind of meets the art. So one of the tools we've got, which Paul referred to, is a thing called the Science of Engagement. For what it's worth, it was named Best PR Product of the Year last year by a global PR analyst. And it's very different from traditional market research. I'll talk a bit more about that, because it builds on things like neuroscience and psychology and anthropology. One of my brightest trainees this year studied anthropology, not marketing. One of the people in the postgraduate course that I talked to with a wee while ago had studied psychology. The application of science to influence, very, very important. In the future, I won't be hiring just people with marketing backgrounds and journalism backgrounds. I'll be hiring mathematicians and psychologists and neuroscientists, because again, that's part of the getting under the skin of what consumers really, really think. So we recruited a panel of leaders in their field. The psychologist, the French psychologist, Dr. Olivier Houllier, for example, advises the current coalition government on engagement. Probably telling them they're not doing it that well, but anyway, he does. And these are worlds apart from traditional market researchers who went out and said, have you heard of this product? Would you buy this product? It's looking at what drives us as consumers to engage with a brand rather than just be aware of it. I'll explain what I mean. So you probably can't read all these, but we've come up with, thanks to this panel of boffins, 19 elements which can drive engagement between us and a brand or an idea that we follow. And it goes from the look of a brand to the sociability of the brand, the experience of that brand. Does it enrich your life? Does it share your values? I come back to one of my favourite clients, Unilever, led by Paul Polman, a visionary CEO who understands that to be a successful brand and to be a successful company, you have to be part of society and part of the things that drive social concern, whether it's sustainable development or whatever it happens to be. And we run not traditional market research, but we run quantitative research programs with panels of 5,000 or more consumers. And we don't ask them the old questions, have you heard of it, would you buy it? Here, try this drink, not this drink, which do you fancy? Which is old market research. We ask about 40 odd questions about how they really sort of engage or feel about a brand. So this is what it looks like. This is a science of engagement footprint for a brand, and you'll see by the weird little purple and red in the middle that a brand can score very highly on some attributes, but very low on others, and this impacts the way you feel about it. So for those of you who are interested in food sales, and let's face it, aren't we all? What drives your engagement with, I don't know, Waitrose or my client Aldi or whatever? Well, it's things like belonging, herd behaviour, social totems, access, respect. Do you feel respected as a consumer? Pleasure that you get from the experience. The aesthetics of, a Waitrose store versus a Tesco store. You probably never think about this stuff, but it's all there in here. Yeah, and increasingly, thanks to the internet, thanks to social media, you have access to far more information about brands than you would have done in the past, where you just see their advertising and either believe it or not believe it. We've been working with a well-known pizza restaurant, which had a problem that people were increasingly, unless you had noisy children like me and it was the only place they'd let you go on a Saturday to eat, people were just falling out of love with their pizzas. It had a business problem, not a PR problem, a business problem. And we ran a science of engagement program to look at why people just didn't get that their pizzas weren't as fresh as they thought. And guess what? It was because of the environment. The restaurants were not as fresh as they used to be when Pizza Express was a relatively new concept. So the marketing director and the CEO thought they had one problem, which is people didn't like their pizzas. They actually had another problem. People didn't like their restaurants. So you put all that together and you look at all the drivers of engagement and you come up with an insight. And the insight then feeds through all the marketing, integrated, PR, experiential, advertising, above the line, below the line, etc., etc. So it sounds simple stuff, but this is the application of science to marketing as opposed to just art to marketing. I talked about the vision of the future before, and one of the things which is becoming much more, thanks to things like YouTube and websites and corporate blogs, etc., is less and less reliance on journalists to get, or people doing product reviews to get your point of view across, which is a good thing, by the way, because the media is declining in trust in this country as fast as politics and some sectors of corporate life as well. So brands becoming publishers. We work with Unilever in the USA on a brand of male underarm deodorant. It doesn't get much more sexy than male underarm deodorant. And the target audience is 20 to 35-year-old men. And the insight was they're interested in high adrenaline sports. So instead of doing the usual thing, which is write press releases and hope somebody will write about it, we hired a bunch of great filmmakers who filmed people jumping off, mountains and, flying off buildings and sort of high adrenaline stuff, which candidly I'd be a bit scared to do, but there you go. And we packaged these beautiful films and we put them on the company's own channels, their own YouTube channels, etc. And we got directly to the target audience, 20 to 35-year-old blokes who like high adrenaline sports and don't like BO. And what in a PR industry, what stands out there? Not a single journalist involved in the transaction. Social media, digital, allows us to engage with customers, with fans, without the traditional conduit, the media, getting in the way. So it's an exciting but brave new world. We also do a lot of research at my firm, and we do a survey every year of chief communications officers for major companies around the world. And the most recent survey shows that 58% of world-class companies around the world are creating and publishing their own content, are in the 18% in the process of preparing to become an original content publisher, which actually, if you're a brand, puts you in a very, very powerful position, because you're not reliant on a third party to tell your story anymore. You can tell it yourself, but you better make sure it's engaging and not boring, otherwise tumbleweed flows through your digital channels. That said, for a lot of chief communications officers, and these were CCOs rather than CMOs, remember, traditional media is still very much part of the mix. So even in North America, where traditional media is dying on its feet, there's actually a website which I follow called MediaDeathWatch.com, and all it does is chart the demise of the print media in North America, where titles aren't shrinking, they are dying and closing. We're not quite there in Europe yet. Communications people are becoming more powerful. I said before that a lot of CMOs end up as CEOs of their company because they're deeply rooted in the business and the business intelligence of their business. But another trend we've noticed is, and how many of you work in a corporate environment? So you will know that the tradition was, you've got the chairman, the CEO, and then you have the warring tribes of Israel. The corporate communications team over here, and the marketing people over there. The corporate communications and PR people hate the marketing people because the marketing people have the big budgets and get to go on sexy photo shoots in parts of the Caribbean, whereas the PR people can barely get down to, you know, the sandwich bar at lunchtime. And the marketing people hate the communications people because the marketing people come up with great ideas. You're probably familiar with Paddy Power's marketing activities, which are really, you know, their head of marketing is called Head of Mischief. There's a brand for you, but they're doing pretty well. So, you know, marketing people come up with great creative ideas, and then the communications people get together with the lawyers and kill the idea. So traditionally, they were at odds. And I've still got clients where the marketing people and the communication people hate each other, and I do conflict resolution between two sides of the client organisation. But increasingly, we are not having CCOs and CMOs, we're having CCMOs, Chief Communications and Marketing Officers. 35% increase in the last year of the number of CCOs with world-class companies who are taking over marketing as well as communications. Why? Because in a world driven by transparency, there is very little difference these days between a corporate brand and a consumer brand. Yeah, a great example of that was P&G, and I don't work for P&G, so I'm happy to talk about them. Procter & Gamble, as you may remember, around their sponsorship of the London Olympic Games in 2012, did those beautiful films about mums and their daughters or sons who were athletes. And, you know, beautiful, beautiful film. And Mark Pritchard, who is their CMO, showed them at a conference I was at. And at the end of it, we're all wiping tears away because they're very emotional. And he said, okay, was that art? Was that public relations? Was it advertising? Was it marketing? It's all of them, all of those things. It was engaging content, which really sort of swept the board. But he is responsible for everything from corporate reputation to brand reputation and brand marketing. No division anymore in innovative companies like P&G, for example. And, you know, there is clear evidence that that convergence is going to continue. So in the survey we do every year of chief communications officers, 84% of chief communications officers at world-class companies agreed that corporate reputation and brand reputation are now indivisible. And companies like P&G, Unilever have kind of led the way. Because, you know, those of you as old as me will remember that some of those corporate brands didn't exist before. You would buy a product, you wouldn't know the company that made it. Now we demand to know the company that made it, because we want to know if the people who make our favourite product are also polluting parts of Africa. Yeah? 20 years ago, you wouldn't have known. And then finally, to draw this to a close, I said at the start that I believe that communications is becoming much more of a C-suite issue. When I first came into PR, you know, a lot of PRs would only get engaged with the CEO at the time of the quarterly results, or if there was a crisis, and then they go back into their cubbyhole again. But increasingly, just as CCOs are becoming CCMOs, the chief executive is becoming the chief communications officer of a company. And we only have to look at recent issues like Tesco to see that no more can a CEO hide and say, oh, I'll fire the PR agency, I'll fire the ad agency, I'll fire the finance director. CEOs are the chief communications officers of companies, full stop. And increasingly, they are becoming social CEOs. So again, we do this study with CCOs, and of the world's most reputable companies, so they're the ones that people like Management Today and Fortune list as admired companies, 81% of those companies' CEOs now engage socially, do a corporate blog, tweet, etc., engage socially. And you know, this is my colleague Leslie Gaines-Ross, who authored this study, says that companies that are truly social and engage their employees and customers, employees increasingly important stakeholders for us in business, in genuine conversation rather than just broadcasting at them, are the new corporate leaders. CEOs who are social will be the next big thing, and actually that next big thing is already kind of here. But it's not just what business people say. Again, in this survey, we talked to consumers, and 2/3 of consumers said that their perception of CEOs affect their opinions of companies and their products and services. I'm sorry if anybody's here from Tesco. I went to my local Tesco on Saturday, relative to 3 months ago, before the crisis, tumbleweed going around there, and everybody's going to Aldi and Sainsbury's up the road. So the activities of a CEO, the transparency of a CEO, the likability of a CEO, increasingly in a digitally driven world, impacts the way consumers feel about that company and its products and services. So, in conclusion, a couple of things I'd like to leave you with. Firstly, the rules have changed, and the biggest change has actually been social media, which has empowered people to do everything from hold tyrants in the Middle East to account, to hold my train company to account when they cancel a service. But it also allows us to not just like, but some brands, some innovative brands, as you know, now invite consumers to co-create products. Training shoe companies, for example. Secondly, communications has to be rooted in strategy. One of the things that I like about this particular university is that the PR degree is part of the business school. My daughter's studying PR in North America. She's in the School of Films and Communications, as if there is a common denominator between somebody who wants to, work for a major company as a PRO and somebody who wants to make movies. There kind of is in terms of visual, but you know what I mean. Communications without strategy is froth. It is meaningless. It is here today. It is gone tomorrow. And actually, a lot of the best practice in the world of marketing, both here and in the USA, comes out of politics. Because in politics, you don't do anything. You don't put an ad out, you don't make a speech, though with some of our political leaders you kind of wonder, unless you've studied what the focus groups say, etc., etc. So unless your communication's rooted in strategy, it is just here today, gone tomorrow. We have to seize the opportunity, those of us in PR, to push beyond the traditional boundaries. As I said before, we were not created as a profession of press release writers. We are communicators, and communications today is a far more exciting place to be. We have to get the balance between the science and the art right. PR's have always been quite good about the art, the wacky ideas, the pink plastic cow in the reception area. But increasingly, I'm hiring people with psychology degrees, anthropology degrees, people who understand the science of influence, as opposed to spin, as it's sometimes characterized. Communications is a C-suite issue, and any CEO today worth her or his salt should be the chief communications officer of that firm or that organization. And finally, it is a great time to be in the communications business. It has changed so much in the last 10, 15 years. It's far more exciting, and I'm delighted to see that my profession is now attracting people who 10 years ago would have gone into the city, would have gone into law, would have gone into management consultancy, etc., etc. So it's a great business to be in at a time of such amazing change and opportunity, as well as challenge for brands, companies and organisations. Finally, for those of you who are looking for a job in PR at some point, people always say to me, that's all very well, but, you know, how do I get a job in it? Well, what do people like me look for in staff these days? First of all, it's what I call T-shaped people. People have a broad interest in the world because no brand, no company, no organisation now exists outside of the real world, which is why so many companies that I work with are now engaging with some of the more difficult issues in the world. It's what I call putting the PR into purpose. Social purpose is the biggest issue facing the corporate sector now and in the future. So a broad interest in the world, but a deep specialism, whether that's analytics, creativity, whatever it may be. Secondly, people who can advocate and tell a story. And the two branches of professional life I think do this best, that I increasingly hire from, is law, people with law degrees, there are some of them in this room, and ex-journalists. Because if you think about it, journalists have always been in the content creation business. Because if they don't engage people, people don't buy that newspaper or don't watch that channel. They've always been in the engaging content and storytelling business. I don't hire anybody who doesn't live in the digital world. I scrapped my recent graduate recruitment and replaced it with a very simple thing. They had to send in a 5-minute YouTube video telling their story. And 400 people instantly went to 50 because 350 couldn't be asked. I don't want people who can't be asked. Passion is important, whether that's passion for a brand or passion around issues. Curiosity, wanting to know more about what makes the world tick. Creativity, and finally content. The future of marketing is not words, it's visual. Whether that's Instagram or YouTube videos, we're in an increasingly visual world. And that's me. So I'd love to hear any questions or people saying they radically disagree, because that's what I've come to these things for.
Yeah, right.
He's going to tell you to ask a question, by the way, as opposed to me, I invite it.
There's a gentleman up at the back. Colin, you take the...
Yeah.
Thank you for that. ROI, I'm a numbers person by my background.
Yeah.
Can you give some insight into how you go about demonstrating ROI for the activity?
Yeah, and it's what PR has always been bad at, and marketing and advertising have usually been pretty good at. Well, first of all, I hire lots of strategic planners and business analysts from advertising, yeah, because I'm not going to find them in my own profession. But secondly, I think it's the whole thing about the business of the business. So hiring people who actually want to learn about business rather than communications, because you can kind of teach people communications, but unless you're interested in the business of the business, then you're not going to get very far. So very simply, hire analysts, hire business intelligence people, as opposed to just more and more communications people. Secondly, engage with the client on business issues. Whenever I meet a client, I'll meet some in Manchester tomorrow, I don't say, how's your press coverage going? Or how's your latest advert campaign looking? I say, what's your biggest business issue that keeps you awake at night? And that engages the CEO, the chairman, the finance director in what was previously seen as the frivolous nonsense of PR and publicity. So it is absolutely essential that we do that. And with the science of engagement, I took you through very briefly some of the people who are now getting us those insights, which were not available to my profession until relatively recently.
There's a lady up at the back.
Oh, sorry. Hi.
Hi, thank you. I really enjoyed your discussion. You're very fortunate to have worked with some, and continue to work with some massive brands who maybe on their Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, call it what they will, already have a really good following. So if they're going to put something out, some good content to share. They've always got a captive audience kind of ready there to kind of suck it up and share it. So what top tip or piece of advice would you give to a brand that had less levels of recognition but still a really smart campaign but needed a bit of that more sort of social sharing to help give it some legs and take it somewhere?
Yeah, well look, a brilliant example of how that can be done is if you look at some of the video bloggers in this country who have literally hundreds of thousands of people following them. And they create that content in their own bedroom, but it's engaging content. So actually, it's not about big budgets anymore. You know, the size of your marketing budget doesn't really matter as much as your intelligence and your creativity. So I would say it's about two things. One is understand who you're communicating with and what they want to hear rather than what you want to tell them, because that's engagement. And two is create engaging content. And that isn't, as I say, about the size of your marketing budget. It's about your emotional intelligence, your creativity, and your in-depth understanding of your target audience.
Plus, in terms of making mistakes, so when you said that people don't, Mr. notice things like sort of bad PR, if you go back to Ratner years ago, that seemed like bad PR rather than necessarily a business problem. But when you said the thing about politics and like you wouldn't get your focus market first of all.
Sure.
That worried me then about authenticity, because it seems that politicians just want to get elected and address an audience rather than have a position or a strategy they actually believe in is in everyone's best interests.
Yeah.
And it's that dissonance which still concerns me about PR as a...
Yeah. Well, look, I would say that any company that had a founder and CEO who thought he could tell a business audience that included the Sun's business editor at the time, David Yelland, that the product was crap, hasn't got a PR problem, they've got a business problem. Yeah. So I do think it comes back to business problems rather than PR problems. Business problems can now spin out of control. You know, I worked with a client in the energy sector about 15, 16 years ago that had been amongst one of the most admired companies in the world. And then it did two things. It polluted the Niger Delta, and it thought it was a good idea to sink a great big oil rig in the middle of the North Sea. And their reputation collapsed. Yeah. So these days, your mistakes, you know, you don't have that sort of reputational capital in the bank, which says, oh, it's okay, because actually they were quite good and they sponsored this school orchestra. But your point on politics, and look, you know, I'm not here to defend any one politician. I'm fascinated by politics. I think it is marketing in the raw, because if you're the leader of the opposition, the only power you've got is communications. You don't have anything else. You don't have any power, really, just the power of communication, which is a pity if your name's Ed Miliband. But, you know, I worked for a long time with Tony Blair, and it's quite popular now to kind of diss Tony, just as people were dissing Mrs. Thatcher when she died. But those two politicians, to me, they may have had great marketing people around them. Mrs. Thatcher, those of you remember the 1979 election, first one I voted in, she had the Saatchi brothers, and she had Tim Bell. But what else did she have? Conviction. Tony Blair, yeah, he had Alistair Campbell because he was nervous about the tradition of the British tabloid press destroying Labour leaders' reputations, but he had conviction. And I think that people now increasingly smell lack of conviction in political leaders, and I kind of think that's what we're seeing around us in the run-up to the next election here. So I don't think it's just about marketing. I don't think it's about running politics by focus group, because if you lack conviction, I mean, you know, Ed Miliband, on paper, he's doing a lot of the right things at the moment, but it's not gelling for him. Why? Because he's not credible. He's not got conviction.
It's the authenticity.
Yeah. And do you know a fact? Labour in this country are using the same digital marketing agency that ran Obama's first election campaign, Blue State. Would you notice it? No. Why? Because the product is different. Yeah.
We'll have one last question. Gentleman in the white top, you've been trying for a while.
You spoke a lot about kind of like people who come with like a psychology background and things like that, and how that's kind of becoming quite important to yourself in kind of the PR industry. But what do you think of a PR graduate and somebody who's come out with a PR degree, such as kind of quite a lot of us that come from this university?
20% of my apprentices in the UK this year come from a PR degree background. And I think there are some terrific PR degrees, you know, not blowing smoke up people's skirts, but this is one of them. Manchester, where I am tomorrow, produces some terrific people as well. Whereas, you know, I think there is a real problem in PR, by the way, which if you look at the average PR agency or the average person whose PR whose picture is in PR Week, they're all white middle class. I have never understood. I mean, I wouldn't get on my own graduate training program because I'm, you know, I've got a 2-2 in English and I'm from Salford. So we have a diversity problem. You can't claim to understand Britain if you look nothing like Britain. So I'm passionate about diversity, and for me that's, you know, that's all sorts of things. It's not just the male-female thing. I think actually the PR industry does the female thing very well. The majority of my management team are women, and I'm determined my successor will be a woman as well. But are we as an industry doing very well on other backgrounds? Kind of not really. But no, to answer your point, I think there are some really good PR degrees. I think there are some really good PR postgraduate degrees. Again, this is one of them. And it's bringing in a whole bunch of people now with those sort of intelligence factors that I talked about before, who previously wouldn't have done it in the days when it was a media studies degree at Kingston Polytechnic, which were all a bit of a joke, frankly. Because you are focusing now on strategy, you are focusing on detailed analytics, you are focusing on the, you know, the texture of marketing and public relations rather than the flim, flam and froth which people kind of looked at 20 years ago.
Thanks, Colin. I'm going to draw to a close there because it is 7 o'clock. I'm conscious people may have other commitments to go to. But, I mean, there's certain things that have struck a chord with me. Time of change, opportunity. So change always brings opportunity, whatever area that we're working in, whether it be PR or other areas as well. Reputation and, of course, engagement that you've talked extensively about, Colin. I think there's something here for each of us to take away from whichever environment we're in. If we're from a business background, we can take it back to our businesses and look at how we can engage and how we can create opportunities for our own business. For students, I think a valuable insight into the guru within the area of PR. Please, everybody, join me in showing your appreciation.